Welcome back to the BAT podcast. Howard, Zac, and Alex coming at you. Guys, what's happening?
Good to be with you remote, Howard. How's life on the East Coast?
We're all remote. Yeah, so I'm dialing in from New York City. Zac and Alex are at the world headquarters in San Francisco. Never stopped raining in California a few years back, but here in New York, it rained. Hurricane Ida, we had 5 inches in a span of probably 3 hours. Pretty wild stuff. Was reading the news this morning, people riding the subway trapped on subway cars for 12, 13, 14 hours. Don't have those problems in San Francisco.
Yeah, thankfully everything's just on fire out here.
That's right. There's not a great choice between the East Coast and the West Coast right now. Maybe Midwest is the place to be right now.
Yeah, Tahoe is rough. I mean, the remote work paradise that was Lake Tahoe is not the case now. But hopefully, they can get that thing under control.
It's interesting podcasting with you remotely like this, Howard. I know you're used to it, but it's a new one for me. How's it gone for you before? You've interviewed all of your guests remotely, isn't that right?
All of the guests I think that have ever been on the BAT podcast have been remote. I think it's worked well. We've experimented with a variety of software, Zoom, and other podcast stuff online, but I think it works well.
I think that's the nicest thing you've ever said to me and Alex, basically implying that we're not guests on this podcast.
That's right. We're the filler, Zac, between all the important people.
We got to start, obviously, first and foremost, because it's going to be a very short conversation. How is the car scene in New York?
Car enthusiasm is great. You know, there's not too much hands-on behind the wheel stuff going on in New York City, unless you're driving a cab around, or you're one of the lucky few to have a garage space and a sports car in the city. Luckily for me, my bring a trailer duties are chock full of cars, kind of in the 9 to 5 window, and I'm very happy to then slink into the city nightlife in the non-automotive sector. But there's occasionally some cool stuff out in the wild to be spotted around the city.
I like geeking out on the weirdest taxis. I was pretty stoked to ride in I don't even know the model, that Nissan little short van that's like with a Metris competitor or something.
I also wonder about that. Actually, I was at the airport last week and saw a taxi that was a Tesla Model S, which I don't really understand how that works, because I don't know if you can drive a Tesla around for 8 hours, or maybe, I don't know, quick charge. You can charge it up and get back out there for a few runs, but was intrigued with the Tesla taxi cab.
Painted bright yellow Tesla?
Yeah, full on NYC yellow taxi.
Wow. Hope it's not on autopilot.
For when you just can't quite afford a blade from JFK into Manhattan.
Not yet, Zac. So, yeah, we all survived Monterey. We were chatting, the three of us were down there, and that went well. Hope everyone got a chance to see the coverage we had on the site. A lot of great pics, a lot of great people and cars that came out for that. I think we all had a great time.
And some great results from the cars that were up for auction there. That FMC RV did fantastically well.
Oh, my God, did it ever. Alex, tell us about that.
Well, it was everyone was excited about it, to see it in person, excited about it, just being on the site in general, with the kind of interesting late model diesel swap and the period charm of the redone interior. Ended up selling for, I think, $150,000 with a really long kind of back and forth battle between a couple bidders. Really exciting, and I think kind of reflects how excited people were to see it at our event at Laguna Seca.
So, yeah, we were chatting before we started recording. What are we going to talk about today, as we do every week? So we got some interesting topics on tap, but what I wanted to start with was we've, I guess, been dipping our toe into the deeper end of the water for cool vintage boats. Some folks may remember we did a partnership with the Tahoe Maritime Museum. We helped them deaccession, dispose of, what was it, Alex, 45, 50 boats, some really, really neat stuff. Miss Tahoe.
Sorry, I was going to say, yeah, a huge number of wooden boats, really exciting ones, some really big stuff, from a triple cockpit Garwood all the way down to some kind of 15-foot wooden runabouts, and also a bunch of super cool marine engines, but nothing quite like what you're about to talk about, Howard.
Well, and I'm just I'm just a poser with kind of my intro here because I don't actually know a whole lot about boats. But we are going to list, hopefully by the time this podcast goes live on Monday, a 1984 Apache powerboat called the Warpath. This is a 41-foot powerboat built by the famous Bobby Sacenti, and it won its category at that year's APBA World Championships. For those not familiar, myself included, that is the American Powerboat Association World Championships that took place in Key West, Florida. This thing, unfortunately, we don't have any visuals, just the audio, but it's pretty awesome. It's what else? A carbon Kevlar hull.
Yeah, Kevlar hull, 41 feet. So this is offshore racing in the era before the twin hulls. I think they're all catamarans now, but this is single hull era, 1980s, 41-foot Kevlar. I mean, I always call these a cigarette boat. I don't know if that's the right term for this or not, but big long bow, 3 kind of padded cocoon-like cockpits that everyone sits in, driver in the middle, somebody running the throttles on one side. Absolutely unbelievable boat. 2 supercharged Chevy big block motors, 1,000 horsepower each, driving 2 screws. The thing to watch for when this pops up is the period video of it racing in the 80s through 5, 6, 7, 8 foot open ocean chop, where it is literally 5 seconds of hang time between wave troughs, like flying through the air. Unbelievable. I guess I was showing it to my 10-year-old son. I guess you have to stand driving this thing. You'd probably break your back if you were sitting. I think that's why you would have to stand in these things. But just incredible stuff. Helicopter chasing it along in that video.
I could watch offshore powerboat racing with Van Halen in the background like all day long.
Totally.
All day long. This also sparks memories of Howard. I forced you to watch this documentary, Operation Odessa. Do you recall that?
Yes, highly recommend for folks out there. It's maybe PG-13 and above, so we want to keep this family friendly. But Operation Odessa was very entertaining.
Is that the Russian submarine one? The drug cartels still on a Russian submarine?
Well, yes. The powerboat racing in the 1980s around the state of Florida came at an interesting intersection of another point of history in Florida's past. So closely related, the players involved in the powerboat scene, high overlap with some trips to Cuba. And I think that's what a lot of that sport was born out of. But pretty incredible. Would highly recommend Operation Odessa.
So
The Whittington brothers were racing offshore boats too. They didn't just race 935s. I think they raced power offshore boats, and I think they also raced at Reno in the Unlimited class Warbird aircraft too. They raced everything that was super fast.
I think they raced everything they got their hands on, and they landed their planes on the back straight at Road America and Road Atlanta. Maybe not Road America, Road Atlanta anyways. We could dedicate a whole podcast to Whittington brothers. On this Apache Warpath, Alex, you touched on the twin Chevy big block V8s with Littlefield superchargers and the equivalent of kind of straight pipes. It's pretty awesome. I understand this was in an era where you had touched on it. The boating world was going toward kind of the catamaran design, and Sacenti stuck with this kind of Kevlar hull and kind of the old style construction and was successful with it. But educate me and the audience, the shift to catamaran versus what this boat is. What's kind of the for dummies 101 explanation of that?
Oh man, well, I'm super out of my depth on this. Although texting some of my Lake County friends about boats, they gave me a little bit of a layman's explanation. So I think what the catamaran does is it gets you less friction contact with the water, so you have a potentially higher top speed. But I think one of the reasons that some folks stuck with the single hull is when things get choppy, the catamaran is not. I mean, the hull doesn't work as effectively in choppy water. So I think even today, the fastest catamarans, which are really fast, see the Michael Mann directed documentary Miami Vice 2006 on the catamaran powerboat scene. I believe Jamie Foxx and oh God, I can't remember his name right now, but the other actor, the people recreating the original Miami Vice TV show, they're cruising around in a catamaran. But the single hull, better in chop. This Apache built boat, Warpath. The video has it, I think, over 90 miles an hour in chop, which is like unbelievable.
This thing has.
Have you ever been on a fast speedboat, Howard? The speed is unlike any kind of car. It's crazy. Even going 50 or 60 in a boat is wild.
I never have, but I have to imagine the sensation of speed on the water doing that those type of numbers is quite something.
Like Zach said earlier, this is just kind of anecdotal stories I've heard, but the drug runners running drugs from Central and South America up to Florida in the 80s. No one could catch them. And I think, was it Donzi building holes down there? One of the guys building these fast speedboat holes. Then the cops couldn't catch the drug runners. So then the cops commissioned the same guy who was building holes to build pursuit boats for the police. I mean, I just love that era. All that stuff is so great.
This thing has its power sent through wet sump Mercruiser outdrives, each with a polished aluminum skeg. I couldn't tell you what a skeg it was if my life depended on it.
I think we actually need to bleep that word out.
Totally. Where's the censor button? Amazing boat, though. Really excited to see that one go live. I highly recommend folks watching the videos if possible. Big shock. It used to race in the Northeast, in the Atlantic. Guess where it's located now?
Where is it, Alex?
Miami, of
Nice.
course. Only place you want a boat like that, I think.
So great. What else? We had, like every week, we've had a number of interesting cars move through the site with really neat results. One of my favorites was we had a 1967 Ferrari 330 GTC in a lovely dark blue. But that got me thinking to kind of the year 1967 and that mid-late 60s period. And I don't know if there was a better time to be in the market for a GT or sports car. I mean, the options you had, in 67 and the years surrounding it was pretty remarkable. So we thought it would be cool to talk about kind of, a cross-shop discussion of what would you have bought, in those years. What do you guys think?
Well, first, I just wanted to point out, do you know how much the 330 GTC was in 1967? You bought that car with low options from a dealer. What did you have to fork up then?
I guess I feel like a great historical, like almost like market inflation barometer is, what did a 55 Corvette cost? And I think a 55 Vet cost about $5,000. So I'm going to guess that a 67 GTC was, you have the number there, Zach?
I do, unless I did this calculator wrong, and then everyone's going to slam their heads into their devices.
I'm going to guess it was $20,000.
The number I have is $14,200, which adjusted.
14. I was skewing high. That's what I wanted to say, mid-teens, but who knows? Okay, that sounds about right.
Adjusted for inflation, that's about $120,000 today. So,
I mean, I guess in 67, your first choice is, do you want American or European, right? I mean, so much great American stuff. I guess if you wanted Japanese, you could have bought a Toyota 2000 GT, right? That was 67.
yes.
My favorite car of all time. I love those cars. I think they were quite expensive for what they were. So I'm looking up, Howard. It looks here like a Corvette in '67 was. You're right. It's about $4,000 or $5,000 for a Corvette.
Is that small block or big block?
Ooh, good question. I would imagine $5,000 for a big block, right? That's the last 67, last year of a C2 Corvette. So
Could have gotten the Vet. Could have gotten the Vet. Yeah, you could have gone for an E-Type, right? Could have gone for an E-Type. That would have been up there.
Yeah, first year of the 911S is 67. I think that was probably about $7,000, so about half the price.
I actually have that price pulled up. Ooh, $7,000, basically on the dot for a 67 911S.
What else? I mean, if you were kind of one of the Mad Men guys, high earning exec in those days, what else would be 67? Lamborghini Miura was 67, right? That would have been kind of top of the food chain or close to it.
Yeah, that's a good one. That would be up there for me, maybe the top. I like the weird stuff. I always gravitate towards weird things. So Zach and I were before we started recording, we were talking about ISO Grifo, or
Yeah.
maybe some kind of a Maserati. What Maseratis could you have bought in 1967, Howard?
What would there have been? I mean, you could have bought a Bora, right?
Ooh, is Bora, that would be interesting. Mid-engine, is the Bora out in '67? We have a Ghibli ending tomorrow at '68 SS, so presumably.
Oh no, maybe I'm late. Maybe I'm early on the Bora. Yeah, the Ghibli would have been it.
Yeah.
47 or 49 SS. I mean, Ghibli Spider. That would have been the one to have.
For me, it somewhat depends on where you are. Like I kind of imagine myself in something different if I'm cruising the streets of LA in '67 rather than maybe cruising around Long Island. I think kind of Isto or Maserati, Ferrari, maybe a little more East Coast. I feel like if I was in LA, I'd want a little bit lighter, nimbler, something to drive up the PCH to Malibu like a 911.
But dude, that was first year of the 911S. That's an interesting one, Zach. I don't know if you've got the MSRP of those on tap, but I mean that was total golden era of Detroit, right? I
kind of resent the fact that we're having this conversation topic and we're all just going to universally agree you just want a 911 no matter what year, what time period, just go buy a 911.
See, I'm not in that camp. I mean, what you could get, a Yanko 67 Camaro.
Hell yeah. Actually, was Yanko modifying those first year? I don't know. One curveball for those, you're a sporting man. You want a big V12, fast car, a little bit of flash, but maybe you've got two kids in 1967. Lamborghini Espada, first year, 68,
Ooh.
Overlap year, total weirdo. But I think that's actually a pretty strong pull.
Man,
Howard's just wincing at the fact that I brought
I love those cars so much. I think they're really, really cool. I would love to do that. We actually have a guy, brief sidebar. We have a guy who bought one, I think, from Jason at Denworks, who is trying to drive his Espada right now across the country after purchasing it. He's made 2 or 3 aborted attempts, and he's gonna go again. But we're eventually going to get a success story from him for the site. So a little tease for that, which is a pretty epic adventure. Driving an Espada cross country in period would have been an amazing thing to do. I think that's a car you can drive 150 miles an hour in all day long, probably.
Yeah, all day till the inevitable engine rebuild. But up until that point, pretty amazing. Also, odd curveball for maybe the guy that's lusting after the 2000 GT and is probably an international buyer, but Toyota Sport 800s are among my favorite funky old Japanese cars, and that would be a super strong pull for anyone living inner city lifestyle, again, probably overseas.
We can move to a second to more affordable stuff, but you could have bought a Cobra, right? That would have been up there.
Ooh, nice, good pull.
Maybe new or slightly used.
E-Type? You could buy an E-Type?
E-Type. If we're really talking top of the heap, totally inaccessible, but we know I'm an Alfa Romeo fan. You could have bought a Tipo 33 Stradale. I think they only made 18 or 20 of them, so you weren't going to get one of those unless you were somebody, or you were Jochen Rindt, or you were a current F1 driver, or a team owner, or someone of high society. But that's up there for me.
When does the Howard? When does the Montreal come out? Maybe around 1970, something like that.
Yeah, that was 70, I believe, right around there.
That's the same engine, right? That's the Tipo 33 engine. That little beautiful 2.5 liter or 2.6 liter quad cam V8 with mechanical fuel injection and dry sump lubrication.
I think similar. I think that's one of those people that say their 635 CSI is the same motor as the M1. There are similarities, but I wouldn't say the same.
Okay. Too small. We were talking about small displacement V8s before. That is a small displacement, super cool double overhead cam V8 with that wild. I was looking at one down at Monterey with that wild mechanical fuel injection setup. That's almost like a whole nother V8 engine sitting on top of the V8 to distribute the fuel. Pretty cool stuff.
The 330 GTC was cool. That's more of a 2+2 GT car. I think Alex, for the real noblesse oblige in the late '60s, would probably be a 275 four cam Ferrari. That would have
Oh, of
been,
course, of course. And
you know,
what's the Aston of the period? Is it a DB4 still? Is it DB5? What's the Aston at that time? Late '60s. No, DB5.
DB
It would definitely be a DB5, maybe even a
What's first
DB6.
year of six?
getting
Yeah.
into
Well, because
DB6. Hmm.
Goldfinger is '64, and that's the DB5 debut, right? So it would maybe be DB6 by then.
Yeah, DB6, 65.
No, I'm out now. DB4, maybe a DB5. I can't do a DB6. A little too dumpy. Ferrari
But
over
then,
DB6.
moving on down, you could buy a little Alfa Duetto. That'd be cool. You could have bought, obviously any number of British cars, MGBs, Volvo P1800. That would have been right there in the mix. Man, just even doing stupid stuff like pulling up old photos of San Francisco and New York or Chicago or LA City Street and pick a year. It's just cool to look at the cars in the frame, right? I love doing stuff like that. It's mostly American cars, but very often, depending on the city, there's all these neat, imports and what have you.
I like the idea of driving something special in that era of a bunch of big American cars cruising around. Zach mentioned Sports 800 Toyota. One of my favorites is the Honda S series. So I think in '67 it still probably would have been an S600. Maybe it was 800 by then, but one of those little coupes or
Yes,
convertibles.
that was on my list, Alex. That was on my list. Panteras
Fantastic.
came later, but you could have been cruising a De Tomaso Mangusta. I think that was until '68, '69. But man, kind of
Man,
like, I mean, that thing must have looked like a flying saucer going down the road.
yeah,
in
Mangusta, one of the most
1969.
beautiful cars of all time, for sure. It's a gauge setup in that car. It's so sick.
The piano engine covers that open up, the gull wing thing, so amazing.
Amazing. Yeah. Dino Coupe, shout out, and Spider, right around that era. It's pretty amazing what you could buy at not necessarily the top rung or even a rung down, but sort of that like mid-market Italian sports car heat in the late 1960s. Pretty incredible what came out of that time period.
Absolutely. Buy a Pagoda, Zach. Cruise around in a Pagoda a little bit.
I'm a little too young for that, but I aspire to be the age where I get to cruise around in a Pagoda.
Yeah, you gotta be the silver-haired aging sportsman.
Seeing those photos of those cars in period it's a thing of beauty. I agree, Alex.
Yeah, they're really awesome. Di Tommaso Mangusta, maybe the only car less reliable than an Espada. Would you, if you had to get from coast to coast, you have Mangusta and Espada, what's your choice?
It's American V8. At least I can stop at O'Reilly's on the way for one of them, right?
Yeah, good call. Good call. Very good call.
Alex, yeah, you mentioned Honda S600, S800. We need Randy here in the mix to talk about all the kind of small bore, small displacement options. But you can get real weird in that period, right? Like Auto Bianchi, excuse me. I have to get an edit there. You can even go down the road of like Ford Anglias, Fiat 124s, Fiat 600s. There was a lot of stuff that came out of the late '60s that a number of them that had super long production time.
Slightly earlier, but I would lump Peel P50 into that category as well.
A Peel? Was that a Peel drop?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Wow.
Oddball, small stuff to come out of the 1960s. You got to reference.
All right, Zach, you've got to get from New York to LA. Peel 50 or Lamborghini Espada? What's more likely to get you there?
Oh, God, yeah. Definitely the Espada. Equal opportunity of death in both, though, I think.
Burning to death. Oh, man. What's another late 60s? That's BMW 1600, another reliable, delightful car. A classic now. My late father-in-law, God rest his soul, absolutely loved his 1600 that he drove around in Europe, brought it back to the United States, loved it, claimed it was his favorite car of all the cars he owned over an entire lifetime. That would be another great car.
Totally. And the real weirdos, like, what did they went out and bought the Bauer cab, 2002. Those were rare, but they were around.
There's a 1600 cab too, isn't there? A conversion on the 1600 as well, I think.
That's correct.
What about French? Can we go? Are the three of us without Googling? Are we able to talk French cars in the late '60s? What can you get from Matra? Is there a D-Jet in '67?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, D-Jet stole the word right out of my mouth.
Yeah, well, there was. Did you guys look at the D-Jet that was at our show at Laguna? It's the nicest D-Jet I've ever seen.
Yeah,
huge,
probably the nicest one left.
Huge Webers on it, gigantic. I couldn't believe it. They're bigger than the engine.
And we can have an open community debate whether a DS Citroen is a sports car or not, but those were certainly plentiful. Obviously the SM came a bit later in the early '70s. I love the pivot hard left into cross shop the French.
I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about. I mean, they're like when you think about, you mentioned reference to Mad Men, not a show I've watched a lot, but I know the aesthetic and love the aesthetic. And you think about a super cool, sporting, upper middle income guy with something interesting. Like, what did people get excited about in the late '60s? I mean, seeing a DS driving around, with pneumatic suspension, that's pretty wild stuff to see in the '60s. I think it would be awesome. You'd stand apart. One of my dad's best friends that he's known for over 50 years now, they met because he was driving around in the late '60s in a Morgan three-wheeler. He had like a waxed mustache and a tweed coat and stuff. They just met in a parking lot because it was such a weird thing to see. I love the idea of stuff like that in period.
I'm not going to say I would have been interested in a Renault Caravelle, but I've been digesting this over the last 20-25 seconds. Alpine A110 is probably up there for most people.
Yes.
I think that ought to be late '60s. Or if you want to save a few bucks, buy the Brazilian version, Dean Alpine.
I'm not sure if it's live yet, but we have a Fiat Abarth monomille. Is that how you would say it? Coming up, it's about 1,000 cc rear engine, kind of A110 adjacent. Almost it has some kind of similarity in look to an A110, a little bit more angular styling. We have one coming up, either live now or about to be live soon on the site.
That's a 1 liter car.
I think it's 1,000 cc. It's called a Fiat Abarth monomille 1000. I think is what it is.
Monomille.
So it's the period pictures from this car was owned by the same family forever. Of this guy running rallies with rally plates in Switzerland, pulling over to the side of the road for a quick bite. That, on dirt roads in that car, it covered in dirt with stickers and rally plates on it. That is what a lot of us who run vintage events, we're trying to recapture that kind of feel and look. For a long time ago, we had, you mentioned Toyota 2000 GTs at the top. A couple of years ago, we interviewed a guy who inherited his dad's Toyota 2000 GT that he bought new. This is a story you can find on our site if you just search Toyota 2000 GT. It's in Switzerland. The same family's owned it forever, and they ran it in rallies, and it's all beat up. And what a cool car to have in your family for decades and decades, and have it used in period for events. Super cool.
So what I would do to be able to get in a time machine and go attend the 1967 Targa Florio. Talk about golden era in every sense of the word.
So if I threw it to the room, all of us have to pick one car we'd want to roll around in. Year established, 1967. Location open to individual preference, and same goes for car. What do you pick?
I'll just say it. I'll break the ice. I'll do the terrible thing. 911S, first year, Los Angeles, Hollywood Hills, kind of mid-century home, the Robbie Pyle dream, right? Like that's it for me. Cruising around in that car up there, good color, maybe Bahama yellow. That's it. It's boring.
Yeah.
That's what I want. That's the life I want.
For me, probably LA driving in a semi-comp Cobra. I think that's pretty pinnacle of having made it.
Heading out to the big track at Willow every once in a while. Actually, there's no big track. There was no streets of Willow back then. Taking it out there for some laps on the weekend.
They were out at Willow Springs in the late '60s. They were
absolutely. I think, but there was only one track back then. You could only drive the scary one. There wasn't the streets of Willow yet, I don't think.
Well, honorable mention that I think none of us have touched on, but Streets of San Francisco, Mustang 390 fastback, pretending to be Steve McQueen. If you could go back in time and do that, pretty incredible opportunity.
No, thank you, Zach. Yeah, we did not touch on anything Mustang. Yeah, I mean GT 500 KR 67, like that's up there.
Absolutely.
When was Bullet? What year is Bullet formed, Zach? You should know
Bullet,
that.
man, I think Bullet's actually 68.
I think it is 68.
But
it's close. Close enough.
If I could go back in time and basically set the trend for Steve McQueen, I would jump at that opportunity.
Predate him, Zach. Get in there before McQueen.
Yeah, too bad I'm probably like 9 inches shorter. And I don't have that jawline to match either.
Well, speaking of McQueen and cars, I mean, what was he rolling around in 67? I mean, he had XKSS. That's a car we haven't talked about. I don't know if he had that in 67. He had an Oscar, I think. He had, what else did he have, Howard?
Great poll, Alex. I believe he did have, I believe McQueen did have an Oscar MT4, probably the 1500. That's kind of a deep cut for a car that is a bit esoteric.
He's racing by 67. I know he had a Lotus 11, so that might be 67-ish. He had either drove or owned a 90, what was it? It was a 908 Porsche, right? I think it was a 908. It's the camera car for Le Mans later, and it's the car that he won. Whatever his endurance win was, it was Daytona. People are probably going to scream when they hear me not be able to recall this instantly. Either Daytona or Sebring that he won in that car.
Yes, we talked about Bullet, Zach. You're getting the year on that, but yeah, a few years later, he obviously, Alex, you just mentioned, he filmed Le Mans, amazing movie. The classics only get better with time. A lot of people forget that movie featured actual race footage from the 70 race, but that was a film depicting, I guess,
I think they
fictional race in 71.
I think they entered that 908. I think it's a 908 in the race with cameras strapped to it, which I believe there was some amount of drama. I don't think the FIA loved the idea of that, but I think that's how they got the race footage from that. I mean, that's one of those movies where it's barely a movie. I mean, it doesn't really have a plot. I get why a lot of people think it's long and slow and boring. I've heard that many times, but man, if you're just kind of watching it casually, I mean, it's the way it captures the era and the way it captures racing. I don't know if anyone's ever actually done it better.
Don't disagree with you on any of those fronts, though. I do believe the Le Mans movie car, isn't it an open top GT40?
Oh God, you might be right.
I think it's modified for the camera.
That could be it. I mean, there was filming during the race, and then there was also filming separately, right? Like they were, the wrecks, the 917 wreck and all that was done separately. In fact, in one of the scenes, you can see famously the Gulf bodywork pop off, and it's an Elva or something underneath it. You can see the yellow bodywork of the car that they smashed up underneath the bodywork.
Alex, I'm just looking at some random stuff. By 1974, McQueen had become the highest paid movie star in the world. That's probably not surprising. Actually, that is, if you ask me, highest paid in the 70s. I don't know if McQueen would have been on the top of the list.
Who would be at the top of your list?
I mean, it's him and Newman, right? It's him and Newman going back and forth, right? The two car guys.
But also that McQueen was often combative with directors and producers.
Mm-hmm. I think he was combative. I think he was combative with other people. I don't want to just besmirch his legacy, but a combative person in general. He had a tough life. He was a Marine and was either orphaned or grew up in kind of foster care home situation. He was a tough guy, an actual tough guy. But yeah, maybe not quite as polished as Paul Newman, who is my hero, of course.
Certainly, and who was quite a racing driver, as people know, but was quite a racing driver later in life. I mean, he was acquitting himself quite well into his 60s and maybe even 70s, and he was running. We had Paul Gentilozzi on this podcast a couple of months back, and in the 80s Trans Am series, Newman was up there, and he was doing his thing.
Yeah, I think he was another guy that it's just super cool, kind of epitome of cool to me. Both of them, so handsome and such style icons. But he was somebody who, like, a lot of successful people, so driven, right? I mean, when you really sink your teeth into something like sports car racing, if you want to be good at it, you've really got to you've really got to jump in with both feet and commit to it, which is something I think he did, like you said, late in life, which is really impressive.
Well, it's no surprise that if we're talking about the 60s car culture, that the conversation quickly turns to the people and all the amazing individuals that shape so much of what we're doing today. And even guys like Enzo Ferrari in the 60s that were, still young and still rising, and, all the amazing stuff that they were up to, and that they even hadn't accomplished yet.
Yeah, people often use a term which I'm not a huge fan of the golden era of sports cars, and they apply it to a lot of different points in time. I think you could ask 10 different people and get 10 different answers. Um, Probably none of which would be the early 1980s, but I am a little curious what you would say, Howard, if I asked you what you think the cliche golden year of sports cars is. Would you say it's around the late 1960s?
Well, Alex would be even more equipped than me to answer this, and a fascinating question, Zach. It really depends who you ask and what age you are. A lot of people would say the golden era, it was the 30s, and the Bentleys and the big Alphas and the SSK Mercedes running at Le Mans and Spa and all those races, in the post depression years. Some people would say it was the Vanderbilt Cup era, right? How far back do you want to go? I mean, for me, it's 50s and 60s. European sports car racing, not even only European, I mean, in the U.S. and Europe. But there is definitely, the point being, there is definitely not a singular answer to that question. I think it's highly dependent on, who you're asking and when they were alive, and, what they marveled after. Alex, what's your answer?
Yeah, I mean, for sports car racing, for me, it's always been, I think this comes from a Sam Posey piece I read in Road and Track years ago, but it's the Can-Am era for sports car racing. Right, so the late 60s, the second half of the 60s, GT40s, 917s, the freaking chaparrals, which are so crazy and innovative, the huge wings, turbine cars, ground effects. People are learning about aerodynamics. It's unlimited, which is so crazy, right? Like figure it out. Like if you can make it work, you get to go race it, right? And that's, I guess we're still dealing with the ramifications of all the rules that come down after, people are running twin turbo 917 open cockpit cars 250 miles an hour down the Mulsanne straight without the wheels touching the ground at all. I mean, that's like, you got to stop it after that. So for me, that's the golden era for sports car racing. I would actually, this is going to sound so on brand and cliche, but I think there's a strong case for the 90s being the golden era for sports car, like road sports cars. It's pre, paddle gearboxes and everything being turbocharged. So you've got really wild supercars like, the Ferrari F50 and the McLaren and the Carrera GTs, maybe early 2000s. But,
maybe 110 quad turbo.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's maybe not quite XJ220, not quite living up to my normally aspirated engine kind of analog thing. But
the engineering was reaching new heights at impressive levels for sure.
I agree. Yeah, production car racing in the 90s, huge participation for all manufacturers. Interesting. I don't think actually F50 or EB110 they actually did a whole lot in terms of motorsports, but. Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I would say what Alex, maybe this is what you're getting at, but it's the intersection of usability and engineering.
Right.
You can really start to use some impressively engineered cars, just sort of like everyday objects, where you certainly could earlier, but it was a lot more of a commitment, and you had a lot more hair on your chest for doing it.
I mean, we're making jokes about none of these cars will get coast to coast in 1967, right? So, I mean, the idea of jumping in a 993. Or, a Ferrari 328 or a Ferrari, 348 or whatever it would be in the 90s, and actually using it, maybe not in the Ferrari, but certainly in an NSX or a 911, the air conditioning is going to work. It's got cruise control, but it's...
Oh, it's so boring. It's not even a conversation topic. Like, yeah, of course you made it. Where'd you...
So many things in play. I mean, cross-country trips before the interstates were built, Alex. I mean, there could be a whole... discussion devoted to building the interstates and
oh man, we want to talk Eisenhower. We want to talk about Eisenhower in the 1920s driving the first army convoy in 1920 across the country after World War I. That's another podcast.
But you touched on it. I mean, in terms of racing and the most terrifying era, late 60s, before ground effects, before all the aerodynamic advancements, in the F1 and Indy cars that were so powerful, still on treaded tires. I mean, it's no wonder. I don't know if there was a graph of peak racing deaths, but I have to imagine it was in that period. And it's a reason why those cars are rare today, and the number of people that want to strap themselves into a Gurney Eagle Indy car is a pretty small number,
yeah.
and I'm certainly not among them.
The Gurney Eagle Formula One car, I think the only American built, designed, and fielded and driven Formula One car, all American. That I think it's 67. Actually, we're coming back to 67. I remember reading another article years ago, Gurney driving that at Spa, and he was 6'1" or 6'2", I think. V12, beautiful mid-engine cigar body, and he would duck. He would hunch down in the cockpit to get from 197 up to 200 miles an hour on the straight at Spa. I mean, what an era! Amazing stuff.
So great. So no, this was good, guys. So you're out there, and how is San Francisco these days? How's the early fall season?
It's got this beautiful blanket of fog and smoke to where it's really seasonally ambiguous is how I would classify.
Hard to tell. Yeah. Hard to tell whether it's fog or smoke, right?
Early September, one day it's 80 degrees, the next day it's 62. You don't really know what you're inhaling. It's nice. We miss you, dude.
Do you still own your 911, or can you not discuss that publicly? Or all summer we've been talking about what's happening with that. Alex is kind of slinking away, maybe getting another beer.
I definitely do own a 911. Man, I even though I'm thinking of selling that car, I got upsold on some gauge restoration. They're looking nice and clear at this point, functioning well. Red line was raised to 7,300, so the car is feeling great.
You graduated yourself to the 7300 chip, huh?
I know. I had post break-in on the 2.7, so yeah, it riffs super hard. Not even for an old car, but just in terms of modern car standards, it's pretty ridiculous. So hopefully you'll get to drive it around before it goes.
Howard, when you're in New York, do you rent a car at all? Do you drive at all, or it's just complete divorce and separation from driving automobiles?
Absolutely complete divorce. I do not drive a single time. I ride the subway, I walk, and it's fantastic.
How far does one have to travel outside of NYC to get to roads that are fun to drive
on? I mean, it depends where you're from and what you consider fun, but I would probably say, at least an hour.
But Lime Rock's like an hour-ish from Manhattan, right?
A little farther, depending on when you go. I mean, I think I might rent a car and wade into the waters of car rental NYC. We'll see how that goes.
Well, we have that great experience where I got this wonderful photo of you asleep in the passenger seat of my Audi A4 silver car rental last time.
Yeah, silver car. That was a great time, man.
Is that what you guys were going to Lime Rock?
Yes, it was. Yeah, great.
Is Lime Rock on Long Island? Where is it? Is it further north? Where is
it's
Lime
north.
Rock?
It's like past.
No. Upstate Connecticut, northwest Connecticut, near the New York state line.
Gotcha. Can you? Is there any enjoyable driving on Long Island if you go far enough east?
You go far enough to drive into the water, and that's pretty exciting. But
I mean, there are for listeners out there. We'd love you to chime in both on your dream 1967 era cars and favorite driving roads in the Northeast. But there are a few, but it's not California.
Spoiled, I guess, other than the smog and fog and fire.
Long Island car scene is like West LA car scene, right? It's G-Wagons and Range Rovers and occasional neighborhood.
Long Island is a Long Island, so you get out east to Suffolk County. It's G-Wagons and D90s and a number of other things, but Main Island is maybe newer G-Wagons. All right, gents. I think we're going to wrap it there. We've been getting some great feedback to podcast at Bring a Trailer. If you got questions, comments, we're still compiling our listener mailbag episode. If you want to be a guest, think you'd be an interesting interview candidate, send us an email, podcast at. We'll talk to you.
I would also encourage anyone that has an opinion on what kind of car Howard should rent in New York City to please email us at podcast@. And I think if we get enough, we could throw it to a vote and just have the community pick your rental car, Howard.
I actually love
I don't know. Inflation takes many forms, and it's being felt pretty hard in rental car prices. So what you could have rented 18 months ago for your dollar ain't what you can today. But
well, thankfully for you, a U-Haul is still $24.99, and maybe you'll be driving around in a van to your next destination.
What's a Versa cost, Zach? Do you think you want to do a little cross shopping, used Versa that you drive around here in the city versus a new rental Versa on the East Coast?
What I do love is riding cabs in New York City, and cab drivers who probably they don't really care about cars or driving, and yet they are great drivers. They're so aggressive. No one ever has an accident. They are literally bump drafting and nearly trading paint, going up and down the avenues, and it all works out.
Yeah, I have a great PG-13 related story, because I think you get one F-bomb in a PG-13 movie about my last New York cab experience that I'll share with you off air, Howard.
Do you remember, can you at least share what the vehicle was that you were in?
Man, what is the small Nissan van? I think it's a shared platform.
Like an S-Cargo, or am I totally off?
Is that weird, funky, imported thing?
Isn't there a kind of a dedicated cab Nissan vehicle that like took over from the Crown Vics in NYC? I thought I heard that was like the cab of the future. It's
yes,
a Nissan.
NV200.
200, yes, that's right.
200 is
NV spec, yeah. And then you can get the tall roof one if you want to move out of your SF apartment and lower your overhead.
And then they have those weird Chinese built Dodges. They're actual cars from China, but they have Dodge badges here. Have you seen those rolling around?
As cabs?
Yes.
I gotta check that out.
Did you say there's an NV200 C-Max version? Isn't it already a pretty tall roof on those things?
It gets taller.
I mean, it's like to me, in pictures at least, because I haven't been to NYC in a long time, they look like the future that somebody imagined in like in a movie about the future in the 1980s or 1990s, right? This is what cars are going to look like in the 2020s, and here we are. We've got kind of a square pod that moves people around.
Well said. I'm very pro yellow cab, especially after riding in so many Lyfts and Ubers out here. I love that it just is what it is. There's literally a partition between you and the driver, setting the tone for one another to not speak with each other, and you can just sit back, relax, and enjoy your ride in from JFK.
Well, that and also New York City is one of the last remaining places, I believe, where it's actually quicker, easier, and cheaper to get a cab than call a Lyft or Uber. So I appreciate that. I like.
You ever go down to the subways? You ever ride the escalator down, take the stairs down, Howard, or do you stay above ground?
No. I ride subway everywhere when I can. Yeah.
What makes what changes the decision on whether you get in a cab or you take the subway?
I mean, depending where you are, if it's raining and you got a multi-block walk, or if you're with a group that don't want to ride the subway at night, I don't know. I don't care about riding the subway at any time of the day or night.
Yeah, distance and number of potential subway transfers, I think, is usually what makes the call for me.
But subway is by far the easiest way to get anywhere in the city. It's $2.75 per ride. Like, if you need to go somewhere near a subway stop and you get in a car, like I can't look you in the eye.
Great.
Cool. We'll go deep on subway talk, yellow cabs, and you can update us on your rental, I guess, on the next one.
Yeah, maybe next time we can talk. If you're 1967, what underground system do you want to ride? Do you want to be on the tube? Do you want to be on the metro in Paris? Do you want to be in the New York subway?
Yeah, tell us your favorite East Coast driving road and also your favorite NYC subway route.
No, and we like this pick a year and cross shop. Next time we're gonna pick a more challenging year with fewer obvious options. We'll see how we fare. But no, thanks for listening.
2019.
1977.
Yeah.
Oof.
Ooh, another. Yeah.
I'm game for
There's
that one.
much more cars at Le Mans in 77 than 2019.
Agreed.
All right, gents. Pleasure to be with you. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.